Hi, everyone. My name is Rita Stevenson. I am the Executive Director for the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Council of Tarrant County, and I'm so excited to have everyone here with us today. We are going to have a wonderful presentation. I would like to introduce those that are unfamiliar with the council. The IDD Council was formed in 2015 with the purpose to transform the region into an inclusive community where people with intellectual and developmental disabilities can thrive. So we bring stakeholders together. When I say stakeholders, I mean self-advocates, family members, caregivers, governmental entities, and organizations that provide services for people with IDD. We bring all these people together to try to create an environment to develop an efficient and accessible system of support for people with IDD. We host caregiver education sessions each Tuesday that we would love to have you attend. Some of the upcoming sessions will be next Tuesday's severe weather and emergency planning, human trafficking and what you need to know. And then we're going to kick off with autism awareness and have a panel discussion. The first Thursday of each month, we have presentations at our IDD Council meeting, and we are going to discuss this Thursday protecting against online abuse for people with IDD. In April, we're going to kick off Autism Awareness Week, and we're going to discuss some legislative updates. We are also holding an Egg Your House fundraiser. I encourage everyone to visit iddcouncil.org website under activities and events, and you can learn more about those activities as well. I want to say thank you so much to our sponsors. AmeriGroup is our sponsor for this event, and our sponsor, Texas Workforce Solutions. And Natasha is online with us. She has been a wealth of information and helped put all this together with me, and couldn't do without her. I would like for Natasha right quick to kind of give us a little bit of information about herself and Texas Workforce.
Yes, so I'm Natasha Mendenhall. Some of you have gotten emails from me. If you are not currently working with a Texas Workforce Vocational Rehabilitation Counselor or Transition Counselor, if you're not already connected with us or you have been in the past but are not currently, please get in touch with me because we want to make sure that you participate during this webinar, but also that you would be able to continue receiving pre-employment transition services, and a lot of summer things are coming up, so I look forward to speaking to some of you all that are new to Texas Workforce Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Miss Lucy. Lucy, I'm going to turn the screen over to you.
Lucy Gafford. I work at University of North Texas with UNT Wise. I hope we've either seen some of you in the past or will see some of you in the future at some of our summer programs that we do. We have our Live and Learn college-wise and STEM programs where students can come to campus and stay and learn a lot about different vocational independent living skills, that kind of stuff. And we do a lot of presentations like this or one-day seminars. We always enjoy it. This summer, we will be doing a virtual camp in lieu of an in-person camp just because of the pandemic right now. So hopefully next year, we'll be able to get back in person and have lots and lots of students on campus. So just wanted to give you a plug for that. Definitely talk to your VR counselor if you're interested. Today, we are actually talking about first impressions. First impressions are really important because when you meet someone that first time, it is how they are going to feel about you, at least in that first meeting, but it also kind of colors how they feel about you for a time after. Probably heard people say things like you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. That's very true because whether we want to or not, once we meet a person and we kind of have a thought about them, that's how we're going to think about them until potentially you can change a person's mind. It's not like they're always going to think that way about you, but it's a lot easier if we make a good first impression and we continue to build on that good first impression instead of making a bad impression and then you're having to work really hard to change that, right? So it's really impactful. Some of the reasons that we want to think about this is when you're in one opportunity, like at school or in a social setting, it might lead to other opportunities. So you're at school and maybe you make a good first impression and somebody wants to be your friend. Well, that's great, right? Maybe you are at school and somebody sees how hard you're working and says, hey, I really want you to come work for me. So now you've got a job opportunity. There's a lot of different ways that those first impressions can be just really impactful long-term as far as making a difference in what kind of opportunities you can have. So what happens when you make a bad first impression? Well, we hope we don't make bad first impressions. It does happen, that's okay. But it can set an entire tone for that relationship. You know, there's a saying that for every one bad experience you have to have 7 good ones to erase that one bad one. So imagine if you meet somebody and make a bad impression, you have to meet with them 7 more times just to get back to ground zero, right? So we really want to try and avoid those bad first impressions as much as possible. The bad first impression, I'm sure some of you can think of some times where maybe you did something and then you came away from that and thought, oh my gosh, why did I do that? That's, you know, it happens. It's going to happen. Again, our goal is to try and, you know, eliminate that as much as possible. It can definitely lead to fewer opportunities. So, you know, if you randomly meet somebody who maybe works in the community, I mean, even thinking about things like all of your friends' parents probably have jobs or they're out in the community doing things. And if you are hanging out with your friends and they see you as someone who's respectful and, you know, always having, you know, I mean, obviously you're going to have a good time with your friends, but you're being respectful and you're not causing problems. They may go, hey, I really want to hire Joe Blow over there because he does a really great job. And he, you know, I see that he's a good kid. That's a way that you could make that good first impression. If you make a bad first impression, you know, obviously that it might take a little more time to get some of those opportunities. It just leads to fewer opportunities. It can limit your income and advancement chances at work. So let's say you get a job and then you make a bad impression with a new boss or a new employee. It might cause issues with getting a promotion or getting to do things that you want to do. So again, you know, it's really all about how you're creating more opportunity for yourself. You definitely don't want to create an unfavorable reputation in your community and your community could be small. It could be, you know, your neighborhood. It could be a few people that you hang out with. It could be really large, like your entire school, your school district, you know, if you go to a really large church, things like that. Having that unfavorable reputation, again, it's just reducing your opportunities for what you could be doing in the future. Definitely can ruin chances of furthering friendships and relationships. You know, if you're in the workplace, that's where a lot of us make friends and find people that we like to hang out with. And if you make that bad first impression, it's going to be harder to have those relationships. You might also feel undervalued, dismissed, ignored, and that, you know, that's not what any of us want to feel. And it definitely will lose you a chance for a second interview. So anytime we're talking about employment, that first impression is key, because think of it this way. All a person gets to see before you go to an interview is a piece of paper, an application that has your name and some really basic information on it, right? So your first impression when you're showing up, if it's on the phone, if it's in person, if it's via Zoom, that first impression can make or break whether you get that job, whether you're going to get a second interview. And as a person who has interviewed a lot of people in the past, I can tell you, it's not fun that I have to judge someone in that very short amount of time. You know, I see your resume, I see your application, I get to know you about this much, and then we get like a 30-minute to an hour interview, and that's what I have to judge you on. It's almost impossible. I can say it is very difficult to do. So you have the responsibility on the other side as the interviewee to make sure that you're making a really good first impression, you're putting your best foot forward, okay? So I just think that's really important to consider. Some of the things that we really want to consider, again, is you're not always going to meet people the first time face to face. So you are not necessarily going to be applying for a job and interviewing right that second, okay? A lot of times what happens is you may have contact with someone in another format like phone and email, or even you're resume and your application are a first impression too. If you turn in a resume or an application that has a lot of errors, like spelling errors, or you wrote it in really sloppy handwriting, like if I see that, I'm going to think, oh, they didn't really care to take the time to write it nicely, or they just, this isn't something that they were taking seriously. So keep that in mind. Everything from turning in that first piece of paper to, phone and email calls. A few things to consider when you're answering a phone. I always love when I call somebody and they're like, hello. I feel like they're mad at me immediately. So when you're picking up the phone, like I always try and answer my phone, and even if I'm not in the best mood, I make sure I sound as nice as possible. I'm going to say, hey, this is Lucy, or hello, you've reached Lucy, those kinds of things, because I don't know, it could be somebody on the other side that's like, hey, I'm calling to offer you an interview, and I've made a better first impression. So being polite and courteous, obviously that extends through the entire conversation, not just when you answer the phone, but really a lot of people today I notice will answer the phone, it's like, who's this? And that's not really a good way, or what's up? And that's not very professional. Obviously, if you know who's calling, we've all got caller ID pretty much. But if you have turned in applications, these are going to be people that you don't know. And so if you're answering that, make sure that you're answering in a polite and courteous way. Definitely take notes and ask them to repeat anything that you need repeated. So people are going to, if they're calling and offering you an interview and you're having this conversation, it is absolutely appropriate to say, hey, can I grab a piece of paper so I can take notes? Me as an employer, I think you're really responsible if you're doing that. I'm saying, hey, they really want to make sure they get all this down. And of course you can grab a piece of paper and a pen to write it all down. But take those notes, because the worst thing that could happen is you get offered an interview, you don't write it down, and then you forget and you're going, oh wait, who was that called me, and why did they call me, and what date was the interview? You just really want to make sure that you're taking the time to take this seriously. Good manners, please, thank you, I appreciate the call. Those kinds of things go a long way. Don't use slang or abbreviations. You may even have people texting you. That does happen with employers where they may text you. Be careful what you're communicating in those fashions, okay? A bunch of weird emojis and whatnot, probably not the right way to communicate with someone who could potentially be your boss, right? And make sure that you have an appropriate voicemail. If you have applied for a job and you've put your phone number out there, and if I call and you can't answer at that time because you're in school or doing something, and all of a sudden this weird voicemail message comes on, what kind of impression might that make? It might turn me off a little bit and go, I don't know about this. It's not the end of the world to have something that's upbeat and fun, but definitely just, you might want to run it by family, friends, teacher, somebody to say, is it appropriate if you have any questions? Email, same. Except the only thing I'll say about email, guys, and this is something I experience a lot, is that email has no tone. At least when you hear me talking, you can get a sense of I'm in a good mood or I'm not in a good mood, or you can see my face if we're on Zoom and you can read those clues, right? In email, it's literally generally black and white. It's just letters, on the screen. So it's really important to keep in mind that when you're using email, you kind of have to be a lot more thoughtful, because the important part is not what you intend with your email, it's how it's perceived. So when you hit send and that person sees it, how do they feel when they read the email? So don't say something online that you wouldn't want to see printed for all to see. Yeah, definitely, obviously, you don't want to say something inappropriate in an email. Another one that people make a mistake with is using inappropriate email addresses. So think of it like this. You wouldn't want your employer, if you're filling out an application and your email is like babygirlprincess5000, probably not the right email to use, right? So if your email is joeblow123, like first name, last name, and some numbers, that's totally appropriate. So keep that in mind. If you've got that kind of an email, you may want to create a professional email that is just for your communication with employers and in those more professional settings. That might be the email you use in school or with teachers, rather than using something like Baby Girl Princess or Buff Bro 99, right? Keep it simple. Don't use any slang or abbreviations in your emails either. If you're, say, a common thing to do when you're trying to get an interview is to follow up and email and say, hey, I turned in an application. I was curious if you might be interviewing people soon. All of those things are great. What you don't want to use is a lot of slang or, abbreviations like TTYL, talk to you later, GTG, gotta go. Half the time I see these abbreviations, guys, that people put in text messages or emails, and I have to go and Google what they mean, okay? So it's not really an appropriate thing to use in a professional setting. And it's definitely, you're gonna have, don't put it on your applications, don't do it in emails when you're reaching out, before or after an interview at any point with an employer. And definitely double check your spelling and grammar. There's so many, really all of the things that you're using on the computer should have some sort of spell check feature. You can even download Grammarly, which is you can use it for free, and they do have a paid option, but they have a free option that will check your grammar for you. Like, I wish I had had that when I was in high school. English was not my favorite subject, okay? So just something to consider as you're moving through those different pieces. Dress. One of the things they always say is dress for the job you want, not for the job you have. Hopefully you've heard that before. It just means that anytime we're in a situation, at my office, we're very business casual most days. When we're doing presentations, we tend to wear green UNT type shirts, to show our branding. But if we're in really professional settings, we're wearing full on suits, and that's what I would expect from my staff. If you are applying for a job with me, I would expect that you would show up. And because our typical dress is business casual, but we go all the way to suit wear, that you would at least dress in a nice button down, khaki pants, tie, that kind of thing. Or for ladies, it could be nice button down blouse and khaki pants, something like that, or a dress if you prefer. So make sure that you're being mindful of what that is. If you're applying for your first job at Target as a cart pusher, you still don't want to show up in your pajamas, because what is that going to say? That's going to say I'm not taking this very seriously. But you could definitely show up in like a nice polo and khaki pants, something like that. When you look at this picture, I think it's a really cool way of seeing kind of from least formal to most formal. Most of the time, if you're going to an interview, you're going to be somewhere in that maybe middle range, okay? You should never wear flip-flops or shorts. Girls shouldn't be wearing little tank, well, neither should guys. Nobody should be wearing tank tops, spaghetti straps, none of that stuff. You want to look very presentable. And honestly, ask someone. Sometimes I think I look great, and maybe I don't look as great as I think I do. It can be helpful just to go to a friend or a family member, a teacher, and say, hey, does this look appropriate? Does this match? I mean, I'm not kidding, especially, somebody who's colorblind maybe might need help matching and make sure that their outfit isn't standing out too much. It is very different depending on which work environment you're going to. If you're applying for a job to be a mechanic at a car shop, you're probably not going to show up in a full-on suit, but you're still not going to show up in your pajamas or in shorts and a t-shirt, right? You still want to show that you're professional and that you really want this job. Definitely wear clothes like I have legitimately seen people get hired on the spot. So wear clothes that you're ready to go to work in right then. It's definitely better to be overdressed than underdressed, and make sure that everything looks neat and clean. I know I pulled stuff out and thought, oh my gosh, what happened to this? Like, it got all, wrinkled in the washer and the dryer. You got to pull out the iron. It's like my least favorite thing to do, guys. I do not like ironing, but you got to do it if you're clothes are wrinkling. And you can certainly ask when they offer you the interview, what's the dress code? And that way it gives you an idea, because if they say it's pretty formal, then you'd want to dress more formal. So those are really good things to keep in mind. So our appearance when we're making first impressions, it's not just about what you wear, it's also just about your appearance in general. I will say that things have changed over time. 10, 15 years ago even, I would have advised that you not show up with like purple hair necessarily, because that could be very off-putting. Today, there's definitely a lot of work environments, including mine. I have several employees who have brightly colored hair. My dean often has brightly colored hair. She's a professional with a PhD. So it depends on the work environment. what I would say is nowadays you need to do a little more research to know what that work environment is. There are still work environments that do not appreciate orange hair if your hair is generally not orange, or purple hair if your hair is not generally purple. And so definitely keep that in mind. Some things like making sure you have clean, well-groomed hairstyle. That is something that is very important. Clean and well-groomed is very general, guys. There are tons of different hairstyles out there, and mine changes from day to day. Today it's straight, some days it's curly. I know a lot of people have that. So as long as it doesn't look like you just rolled out of bed or haven't showered in a month, it's generally going to be okay, okay? But any hairstyle is okay as long as it's intentional and clean. So again, you didn't just roll out of bed and, you're showing up to the interview. But there are a lot of different hairstyles nowadays, which is really cool. That's also great for diversity. Clean trimmed fingernails. So if you're, just make sure, I'm going to admit, I'm not always good about not biting my nails. So make sure your nails are clean, trimmed. You don't want like dirt and stuff underneath them as much as possible. It might be tough if you're working as a mechanic sometimes to get all that dirt out, but do the best you can. I would always say minimal cologne and perfume. And the reason for that is there are people who are highly allergic, and it can be really off-putting. If you walk in and you're just wearing too much cologne, it could give that interviewer a headache. It might make them just have a negative association, and you don't want that. So I would say minimal. I'll give you an example. My husband's really allergic. I don't wear perfume anymore because it really bothers him. And so while it doesn't bother me, I'm just a person who has to constantly be mindful of those kinds of things. So be mindful when you're going out to do that too. We say no visible body piercings or tattoos. Again, this is one of those gray areas that 10 or 15 years ago, I would have absolutely given that advice. Nowadays, I say, make sure you know where you're working and where you're going. If you're not sure, I would say lean to the more conservative side and cover up any tattoos or take out any piercings, okay? If if you're applying for a job in a tattoo parlor, I don't think they're going to care if you have piercings or tattoos, okay? So things like that. No body odors. Oh, and I know people probably think that's like such a simple thing, but it is really, really important that you don't want to be off-putting or offensive. Don't go to the gym and then go to your interview, okay? Make sure you have showered, you've brushed your teeth, that you are just generally hygienic for the day. Moderate makeup, again, most places, if you have really wild makeup styles that you like to wear, that is way cool. I've seen a lot of cool makeup artists out there. Probably not the best place in an interview to do your makeup like that, unless you are interviewing for a very specific position that kind of requires that, like being a makeup artist with a company. But generally speaking, you want to kind of make sure that it's not just too out there and flashy for a couple of reasons. Even if they like your makeup, it could be distracting and they're not paying attention to what you're saying. And they're just really distracted, like, oh, your makeup's so pretty and it's cool and I'm looking at it, and they're not hearing what you're saying. And that can be kind of a good bad, right? Then obviously no sunglasses. For guys, making sure that you're either clean shaven or trim, beard, mustache. Beards are very cool. Don't have an issue with beards or mustache. You want to make sure that it's brushed or trimmed and that things look put together. And then no smoking, vaping, gum, or coffee. So not that I would condone anybody smoking or vaping anyway, especially if you're underage. But you definitely do not want to do that right before an interview. You don't want to walk in smelling that way. Again, someone might be allergic. Vaping, don't do that either. It can be off-putting. You don't know how someone feels about it. Don't chew gum during the interview. That seems kind of like a no-brainer. And I know a lot of us chew gum because it keeps us from being nervous and it's something to do. I know you see me, I'm like constantly moving my hands. I'm always twitching. That's just part of my body language, right? In an interview, I try and be a little less of this and a little more keeping my hands and things together. And, really coffee is probably not a good one to drink right before either. One, it can make you jittery, but then two, it can also, unless you can brush your teeth in between your coffee and your interview, it can make your breath smell, which is, unfortunate because I like coffee and I know a lot of other people like coffee, but that can be distracting if someone's just smelling those strong smells. Also, really good idea to give yourself plenty of time before the meeting so that once you get to your interview and you're making, good first impression, you want to be early. But once you get there, maybe go to the bathroom, double check your hair, whatever, your closed. You can take a few deep breaths, kind of center yourself before you go in. I will say I've been doing this a long time, guys. I've been training, I've interviewed a lot of people. I still get nervous going into interviews. I don't know why, it's just part of my personality. Even if I know I'm a really good candidate and I feel really confident in my skills, I still get nervous. So having that few minutes before you go in to be able to just kind of breathe and double check and feel really confident about how you're walking in can really make a big difference and is something to consider. Mikkel, go ahead.
I remember what you said about being clean and well-groomed hairstyle. How do you present yourself in a positive manner and not an offensive manner?
That's kind of this whole presentation is when you're giving yourself in a positive manner. It's everything from your attitude to the way you look, how you act. It's really that whole combination of everything together. And because when we meet people, we are judging them. It's just a fact of nature that we naturally judge people, but we are judging them based on how they talk, what they look like, how they smell, how they're interacting. So really, you just want to be careful and mindful that you're putting your best foot forward. Now, you don't want to not be yourself either, because you certainly don't want to get a job somewhere that isn't a good fit for you, but you don't want to maybe make all of your jokes that you would normally make right away in the interview, right? It's kind of a careful balance. And honestly, all of this takes practice. So I will tell any of you what I tell everybody. Again, I've interviewed a lot of people, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. The more you practice, the better you become at it. And so that's really an important thing. And then that other piece is making sure that you're researching anywhere that you want to apply for, that you're interviewing with, so that you understand what their norms are. At UNT, we are very diverse. We've got, like I said, earrings, tattoos, colorful hair, that kind of stuff. None of that's going to bother us. But if you went into a different environment, that might be more off-putting to somebody. So being a little mindful of those things. And again, these things change over time. What I would tell you today is different from what I would have told you 10 or 15 years ago. So you also kind of have to keep up with the times and make sure anytime, so if you get a job today and then 5 or 10 years from now, you want to change jobs, you might have to come back and look at something again and say, hey, how does this change? Handshakes. Now here's something funny, okay? Handshakes were super important before COVID. Handshakes will probably come back after the pandemic, all right? And it's something to kind of be aware of. Now, here's something that, again, things change over time. To be mindful of, you may not be comfortable with handshakes, and you need to formulate a way to greet someone alternatively. We will talk about that in just a second. If you are comfortable with handshakes, you want to make sure you're doing it appropriately. So you want to make sure when you're shaking hands that you typically are going to stand to shake someone's hand. You want to make sure it's firm as much as possible, that you don't have sweaty or dirty hands. If for some reason I just touched something and somebody came to shake hands with me, I might say, oh, I'm so sorry, my hands are dirty, I can't shake right now. Things like that. Or if I just coughed in my hand instead of my arm, things of that nature. Follow the interviewer's lead. If they don't want to shake your hand, it may be that they are, more cognizant of passing germs, and so you use that alternative greeting. Make eye contact as much as possible when shaking. You want to only shake hands for 2 to 5 seconds. Honestly, it's a good thing to practice, because it's just kind of one of those things that you need to be able to do it and be done with it. And it's quick and it's pretty intentional, okay? Don't shake back and forth. That would be odd. You always want to shake up and down. And typically you would shake at the beginning and end of any meeting, okay? Again, we're in the middle of an unprecedented pandemic, so some things will change. And one of the big things that we want to think about, so I would say practicing handshakes, still something worthwhile, especially if you're going to be comfortable with doing them a year from now, when we're outside of a pandemic. But what's cool is we now have acceptable alternative greetings. So these have become much more accepted, because right now you can't shake hands. And I'll tell you guys, I am an avid handshaker. And this whole pandemic really threw me. I would go in for a handshake and then I'd have to stop myself and go, oh my gosh, I can't, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. So some alternative things that we can do, I'll tell you, especially with Zoom, because I can't shake your hand, I often just wave. That's an easy way, right? Some people you'll see kind of do small bows, like a namaste. You might see people elbow bump or foot bump. You'll see them do the foot bump or elbow bump. Some people use the shaka sign. You can also just kind of give a smile, shoulder raise your eyebrows. You can always kind of do a little salute, like hand over your heart, or you can do a sign language kind of wave salute type thing. If any of those are acceptable to you, great. Again, if going forward for the rest of your life you decide I don't want to shake people's hands because it's too germy, that's totally fine. Just be prepared to let someone know in a nice way, like, oh, you know what, I prefer not to shake hands, I prefer to bow, I prefer to elbow bump, I prefer to be prepared to let someone know what your preferred alternative greeting is.
So is this high school work? Because I kind of feel like we're doing college work in high school.
It's really all of this because you're going to use these kind of skills to get your first job while you're still in high school, and you're going to use these skills 20 years from now. I mean, I still use these skills every time I'm interviewing for a position, and your parents will tell you that they use these kind of skills. Your teachers, they're going to tell you that. And so really this is a skill that you start learning now while you're in high school, and it's just going to grow over time and be something that gets even better over time. Okay, body language. Now, this is one that is probably more important than we realize, and it's one of the ones that we have to work the hardest on. We can hear ourselves, you know, we can make sure our hair looks good and whatnot. Body language tends to be very unconscious. Like I said, I'm a fidgeter, so half the time I'm moving and shaking and doing things and I don't even realize it. But that can be very distracting to people. So again, I have to be really conscious of, oh man, I need to stop doing that, you know, when I'm in an interview. So you want to practice this because it tends to be unconscious and you won't even realize that you're sitting like this, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, no, I need to sit up and I got to pay attention. And so this is one you really have to think about. And it's really important to that first impression, because if I show up and I'm just kind of like sitting here and looking like, and my intention may not be that I'm not interested, but the way I look says I'm not interested, right? So important to remember that. Again, your intention versus perception. Intention doesn't matter as much as what the perception is at times, unfortunately. So some key points: don't fidget or slouch. If you can find ways that you can fidget differently, like I might have a pen that I'm doing something with in my hand so that my whole body's not fidgeting and it's just in my hand, right? You can kind of do those things. Keeping your hands in your lap, or not as, you know, I try not to talk as much with my hands when I'm in an interview. You know, just naturally, I'm a person who talks a lot with my hands. Keep your bottom on the chair and your back against the chair as much as possible. Sitting up straight, you want to make sure that you're not slumped over and slouched. And I will tell you, I catch myself all the time with horrible posture. It's not good for your back, but when you're in an interview, it just looks a little disrespectful. So again, one of those things you have to practice. Maintaining eye contact, that one's tough. That one sometimes can also be accommodated in an interview. If you have particular trouble with maintaining eye contact, that would be when you might ask for like a job coach to help you in an interview. Although, you know, you can also practice that. It can be very uncomfortable, it can be difficult. If it's not a skill that you're going to be really good at, then you might ask your VR counselor to help you get a job coach or somebody that can kind of accommodate that with you. Smile and nod when you're listening. Smiling and nodding, if I'm just sitting here and I might be listening, but it might creep that interviewer out, right? And so having an interactive face, I'm not going to interrupt somebody, but I can smile and nod so that they know I'm listening, correct? Try not to touch your face or cross your arms. That is a very difficult thing to do, let me tell you. I do it all the time. I touch my face a lot. Again, I'm fidgety, so don't do all the things I'm doing. And it takes practice. Again, it's one of those things that when you're in an interview, it's important to be mindful of that. Are you going to do this 100% of the time? Absolutely not. You're going to fidget. You're going to do things like, you know, you're going to touch your face. Your posture may not be perfect in your chair. But in an interview, that first impression is really important. And this is some simple ways to just amplify that and make it a really good first impression. So small talk. Here's another one that can be really hard for people. If I'm having a bad day, I can have a hard time making small talk. So you need to be prepared if you know you're going to be in an interview, definitely. What can be hard is making small talk when you're in those impromptu situations. So remember in the beginning, we talked about you might run into somebody at school, at church, volunteer, that sort of thing. And they could be your future employer. They could be, somebody that is going to give you that first opportunity. In those situations, it's kind of impromptu, meaning you're not prepared for it, right? So this can be another skill that is really important to practice so that you feel more confident when it's impromptu. So be friendly to everyone you encounter. Honestly, this is kind of like the golden rule. Why do we want to be mean to anybody? We really shouldn't. And we should always be friendly. Do you have to like everyone? No. But we should probably be kind and friendly to people, okay? You don't need to be everybody's best friend, but we don't need to be rude or ugly to people. And again, that comes down to you don't know. You could be nice to somebody, and the next thing you know, it's somebody who wants to hire you, or they're the person who is doing your interview. So that's a good thing to just keep in mind. Make sure that you learn the other person's name. I'm great with faces, terrible with names. So this is a skill I have to constantly work on. If you have trouble with that too, you want to make sure that you are thinking of ways like, how do I remember this person's name? If you have to write it down after you finish talking with them, or if you use it in the sentence several times. So, if I first meet and I say, oh, it's nice to meet you, Joe. I really like that name. My grandfather's name was Joe. That might be a way for my memory to kind of lock in on that name, okay? Do not discuss politics or religion, money. These are all things that can be polarizing, okay? Typically they say leave that stuff out of the workplace in general. That's stuff that if you want to talk about it with your family, friends, even in school, I'm sure you guys have lots of conversations about it. But when you're in professional settings, you really want to leave that out because you wouldn't want to offend somebody by saying something. You're entitled to your own opinions and beliefs. That is absolutely okay. What we don't want to do is make someone else feel bad about their opinions and beliefs. And so just kind of keeping that out until you know that it's either a safe conversation to have with a person because now you're friends or whatnot, or just leave it out completely. Don't say anything negative about yourself or others. This can be hard, probably more talking negatively about ourselves. Usually we're not talking negatively about other people unless it's like with our best friend and we're gossiping, right? Which we probably don't want to do either. But talking negatively about ourselves can be really hard. Being self-deprecating is what we call it. Talking, saying negative things about yourself, even making jokes about something that you think you're not good at. You really don't want to put any sort of negative thoughts into someone's mind that you're first meeting, if it's your interview or if it's just an impromptu meeting, because it's not necessary. And it's probably not true. We tend to be harder on ourselves than other people. So making sure that you don't put that in them, because then that might stick with them and they go, oh, really? And it's probably not true anyway. Definitely don't discuss any personal issues or problems. A whole other thing that we will talk about, I say we, and I know it's going to be one of your sessions in the future, is disability disclosure. So, that's a one thing to talk about, but don't talk about problems or issues. You don't need to say, oh, I've got the flu, or, well, hopefully if you aren't at an interview, if you got the flu, you called in and rescheduled. But you wouldn't want to say, oh, my mom got so mad at me last week because I didn't do the laundry. Like, that's not appropriate in an interview, right? Nobody needs to know that. That's a personal issue between you and your family. Good things to talk about, general stuff, sports, weather, common hobbies, as long as none of those things are going to cause you to go off on a tangent. I know some people really love sports, and if they start talking about sports, they'll want to talk about it for an hour. And so you can't dominate a conversation. Small talk is meant to be small talk. We have a few little exchanges, maybe a little laugh, haha, great, and then we're moving on to the next subject. So that's something to practice and think about, is how do you change subjects? How do you talk about something for a sentence or two and then move into the next thing, which is very important. So some common interview questions. This is just some stuff that we kind of want to talk about, because with these being common interview questions, there are some really good ways to answer to leave a really positive, lasting impression. So tell me about yourself. People ask that all the time. And so again, when you're answering this, you don't want to say things like, well, last week my mom grounded me because I didn't do the dishes. Nobody cares about that. That's in your personal life, and you want to keep it focused on tell me about yourself, what they really are asking in relation to the job. Tell me about yourself professionally. And sometimes you can throw in some little things. You might be able to say, you know, oh, I really enjoy animals, especially, or like I have a dog at home, if you're applying for a job at like the shelter. But generally speaking, you're going to talk about past experiences that show like volunteer work, school. They show those good skills you have, that you're punctual, that you're kind, that you're a hard worker, team player. You're going to want to talk about things that show those examples and discuss why you're going to be a good fit for the job. What are your greatest strengths? This is probably one of the questions that people have the hardest time answering. And again, it's because we tend to be really hard on ourselves and we just have an easier time saying negative things. So what I would say here is discuss those traits. Before you ever get to this point where you're in an interview, you need to be able to list like 10 positive things about yourself. You need to be able to sit down and say, here's all the good things about myself. And if you have to like tape it to your mirror and read it to yourself every day, I would do it. It's hard because we tend to want to say negative things about ourselves, which is so sad, right? Like we should be nicer to ourselves. Tell me about a difficult situation and how you dealt with it. These are things that you need to be able to think back to an example of when you had a hard time and answer it positively. So for example, I might say, at my last job, I was working the front register when a customer came in and was very angry about a product that they had purchased and demanded their money back. I handled the situation by calmly and politely letting the customer know that I would refund his money and I apologized for his troubles. Customer became less angry with my calm demeanor and actively thanked me for refunding his money. So in the end, I was able to resolve an issue with an angry customer by remaining calm and being kind. So what I did there, I did not say, oh, this jerk came in. Like you say that and the interviewer is going to go, ooh, I don't want you to call my customers jerks. And I emphasized how I fixed the problem, right? I said I was kind and I stayed calm. And I followed the policy, right? I refunded their money, I thanked them, I was kind, and I stayed calm. So you want to emphasize the things that you did that were really good. And I know we're running out of time, guys, so I'm trying to run through these really quick. Leaving that lasting impression. Almost everyone will make a good first impression, and this is true for the most part. On a good day, most of us are going to come across great, right? Only a few people are going to make a lasting good impression, and that's important because you want to be the person that when you walk out, and I've had these interviews where that person walks out and I say, I'm hiring them. Like I don't even need to interview anybody else. That's my person. So keep that in mind. Display that good attitude, show confidence. That's the one most of us have to work on because it's hard to be confident. It's hard to be nice to ourselves. Be brief, don't over explain, being concise, avoid that negative talk, be intentional with your responses, show attentiveness, be alert and aware, respond questions ethically, have prepared questions to ask, and be friendly. Probably not witty necessarily, maybe a little funny is okay, but you're not doing a comedy routine, okay? That's an important thing to remember. And then finally, some additional resources. This is a lot of good information to look at over time and just to keep this, like save it somewhere for yourself that you can go back to. And our very last slide is just my information if anybody wants to share it. So I know I talked long, I tend to be an over speaker, but I also love the opportunity to come together and especially to work with you guys, because I know it's exciting to be thinking about like those first opportunities. Anybody else have questions? No, I mean, it has to be something that you would, and really, I guess it could also just kind of be like I know sometimes I just clasp my hands and kind of do a little bow greeting just because that's a natural motion. You wouldn't say namaste unless that was part of your cultural, you wouldn't want to be culturally appropriating, but just doing like a little, nobody owns that. You wouldn't necessarily say namaste unless that was actually part of your culture. And that's actually a really good point. You want to be really careful that, you're not, and actually what's funny is the shaka sign. Everybody thinks of like California surfers. That was not from California surfers originally. It was a Buddhist or Hindu greeting, I think. I'd have to go back and remember where it came from exactly, but it actually comes from somebody else and then has been, kind of adopted in other ways. So, I think think as long as you're being genuine and not trying to go out of your way to be over the top, you know, I mean, even like just kind of a head bow can be appropriate. So, but definitely I wouldn't say namaste. I would not say namaste. I think we're using that to label kind of what the action looks like.
I just wanted to say that I'm actually liking this program,
Oh, good. I'm glad.
and y'all are gonna be seeing a lot more of me.
Oh, good. That's exciting. I'm glad that our first one here, like I would hate that if I started it off and you guys are all like, oh my gosh, I don't want to come back. I would feel personally responsible. So I'm glad to hear that. John, I see that you've got your hand raised.
Okay, so can you go back to the slide about how to make a lasting good impression? Because I know how to make a great impression, first one, but I want, yeah, the lasting one. Okay. Show attentiveness, be alert and aware.
And we'll share this slide deck so that you guys can have it as well.
Okay, I see.
These are all pretty common, you know, if you really think about it, kind of common sense. But like I talked about throughout this presentation, a lot of these things are kind of unconscious. And so you have to learn how to consciously think about them, like your body language. You know, like I said, I use my hands too much. I fidget a lot. Like I have to consciously think about that when I'm in an interview. Showing confidence, that's one that people are typically have a harder time with because we tend to get nervous in interviews, things of that nature, you know, that it's showing being more cognizant of your actual, you know, your body mannerisms, those kinds of things.
Hello, my name is Gerald Burgess. You can call me Jerry. I'm new here. I'm on board.
All right.
Welcome,
Nice to
Jerry.
meet you, Jerry.
And I'd like to provide the opportunity for AmeriGroup to introduce information from him. They are a wonderful partner with the IDD Council. Pierre, are you online with us?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Pierre. So everyone, let's welcome Pierre Gant.
Hello, everyone. AmeriGroup is more than honored to have sponsored this 9-week event. And AmeriGroup is just one of the managed care organizations here in Texas for Medicaid recipients, where we help manage the health plan needs for those who are on the Star Plus programs, from the pregnant mom to the person that's in a nursing home. If you have any additional questions about who we are and what we do, you please visit our website, www.amerigroup.com. And again, it's a wonderful presentation. Take some notes myself. So thank you so much, Ms. Gap.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Pierre. Hey, I want to say thanks to all of you guys. This was a lot of fun. I don't always get to hang out with students, and it's one of my favorite parts of my job. And it certainly keeps me on my toes and makes me have to rethink, you know, what I'm doing, and, you know, it gets exciting. So I appreciate you guys letting me come in and work with you, and Rita for inviting me, and Natasha for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Natasha, do you have anything that you would like to add?
I just want to thank everybody for coming. It was good seeing, putting a face to a name to some of you all. And if you have questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me. If you already have a counselor, I can help connect you with them if you're not sure how to get in contact with them. If you don't, then I will help connect you with our services here at Texas Workforce.
I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. And with that, we're going to say bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Oh,
Bye,
thank
everyone.
you.